So this is the brand new 2023 HP Dragonfly Pro. I don't want you to get it confused with the HP Dragonfly Elite. That is a very expensive business laptop that costs a lot of money. This is for the consumer, the regular user, the everyday worker. It costs around $1,000, but I don't know why they put Pro at the end of the name. I don't feel like there's anything Pro about this laptop. Like, you're not buying this to edit video. You're not buying this to do After Effects. You're not buying this to do any sort of 3D work. In fact, there's not even a dedicated GPU. It should have just been called the HP Dragonfly. With the name out of the way, it's still a very nice product. They're not using a solid piece of aluminum, but it is metal. It's a chassis that's been used by incorporating a lot of recycled metals. In fact, it has a very distinct look. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's a black chassis. It does feel a bit plasticky, even though it is technically a metal, but ingrained in the black top are little tiny specks of gray. It reminds me of little pebbles. And because of that, it does attract fingerprints, but not as easily as something like the Razer Blade lineup, for example. It's about a 3.5 pound laptop, so it's not the lightest Ultrabook on the market, but it's fairly light that I don't think anybody's really gonna complain. The port situation is a little weird because I would have loved to have a USB-A port on this, but you're basically getting 3 USB Type-C ports, and 2 of those Type-C ports are USB 4.0. Now, opening up with one hand is super easy, and the touchpad they're using on here is not your standard touchpad. It's a haptic touchpad like you'd find on a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, and it works really well. In fact, I like it a lot better than your standard touchpad that we're used to seeing on most laptops. There's no space for the click to happen. The response from the vibration or the haptic motor is very nice. And I find that the smoothness of moving the mouse on the screen is a lot more accurate than a traditional touchpad. Now, the keyboard is very interesting because the typing experience on this is wonderful. Like, the spaces between the keys are not too wide. I got typing on this very naturally within minutes. The travel distance is nice and clicky. It's one of the better keyboards I've used. The only thing I don't like is the layout, and more specific to these dedicated keys over here. Now, some of them are very useful. Like, for example, the 3 dots you see on the bottom over here are programmable. So you can program this to launch an application, for example. This one over here allows you to control your camera. And then this one at the top brings up the My HP app. The only button I do not like is this one right here because it's meant for help. Like, you press it, it's gonna bring up a virtual assistant. But the problem is you have to subscribe to HP's Concierge Service, which means if you don't want the service, you're stuck with a key that doesn't work. Now, what HP should do is allow you to reprogram it if you don't use the Concierge Service, because then it becomes a lot more functional. Now, I did test out their new Concierge Service, and it just basically brings up a virtual assistant. In fact, I actually disabled my webcam to see if it could fix it. Now, the virtual assistant basically just gives you a bunch of different canned responses, and none of them actually helped fix the problem. So instead, I asked to talk to a representative, but unfortunately the service was down. Now, because this is launching today, the service will be available. And then if you need to talk to a representative, you can easily get there by pushing that key. But the one area they kind of cheaped out on is this display. It's a 1920 by 1200 display. The resolution is not so much the problem. Like, it's a very bright display. It gets over 400 nits of brightness. The color gamut is very good, but the only thing that kind of stinks is the color accuracy. It's not the most color accurate display. Now, if you're just doing general stuff, like you're watching movies, you're in Microsoft Office, and you're browsing the net, the display is totally fine for that. But if I'm someone who wants to like load up Photoshop or Lightroom, and I need my colors to be super accurate, then I'm gonna have a tougher time trusting this display overall. I should also mention that this display is touch, so you can interact with it using your fingers. But because of that, you do get a glossy glass panel, which means if you're in a room with a lot of reflection, this display is going to completely pick it up, and that might be annoying for some users. Webcam is 1440p, so on your next Zoom call, you get to look nice and crispy. Now, this is a laptop using an AMD processor. In fact, I'm glad they are. This Ryzen 7 7736U may be using a Zen 3 Plus architecture, but paired with 16 gigabytes of RAM, a very fast NVMe SSD, and a price point of around $1,000, What you're really getting with this is insane battery life. Like, the battery life on this is so good, and I guarantee no Intel processor this year is going to come even close. Like 14 hours and a half before needing to charge. That's incredible. And the best part about it is it doesn't even get loud. You know, when this thing is completely under load and everything's happening, the loudest this thing got was 42 decibels. Most other Windows Intel laptops are in the 40s, but they're a little bit higher. And for the fans to actually go on, it does take a bit more work than most other traditional laptops. Not as quiet as a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, obviously, but very quiet compared to the competition. Plus, the 7736U may be comparable to a 6800U from last year, but overall performance is still where it should be. Multi-core performance on this is fantastic. Single-core performance on this might be low compared to the competition, but if you're like a developer, this is a great option for you because it's gonna run all your code very well. If you're buying this for creative work, not the best idea. Like, this laptop will be fine if you're using like Adobe Photoshop, if you need to, let's say, jump in and quickly change something in a video edit, but I wouldn't be spending money on this to edit video 24 hours a day. And because of this processor, heat management is also fantastic. Like, the deck of the keyboard never gets hotter than 35 degrees Celsius. It doesn't even feel warm. And when this thing is under load and clock speeds are over 3000 megahertz, it just does such a good job of keeping performance where it should be. Now, internally, everything looks incredible. It's painted black, so you have that very similar look to what it would look like if you opened up a MacBook Air. Weirdly though, they're using a vapor chamber cooler, and that's the kind of dedication that HP took to this laptop. They partnered with AMD, they co-engineered this together, and that's why you're getting super low fan noise when things are completely under load, and also fantastic battery life. Usually you don't see vapor chamber coolers on laptops unless there's a dedicated GPU involved. Now, RAM and storage is obviously soldered onto the motherboard, so that's kind of a bummer, but you do have that big 65 watt-hour battery. One other little thing that I think is super cool is how easy it is to take off the back plate. You just remove the screws, but instead of like trying to pry it open or push it down or use pieces of plastic to wedge it off, it's magnets. Like, it just slaps back on. And if I want to take it off, I just simply take my finger and pull it up. There's nothing to pry, which I wish more laptops had. Now, here's the thing. I have two complaints about this laptop. One, it's very minor, and it's obviously the dedicated virtual assistant key. It's kind of annoying. You can't rebind it if you don't subscribe to the HP Concierge Service. The other complaint is the display. Overall, it's a decent display. It's just the color accuracy is pretty poor for the price point of this laptop. But at the end of the day, this product is still really good. And I feel like it's the closest you're going to get to a MacBook Air experience. It absolutely nails the battery life. The fan noise is super quiet, even under full load. Not as quiet as the MacBook Air, but pretty darn close, and a lot closer than any Intel laptop you're gonna find on the market today. It performs very well for general productivity. It's just that you're not gonna get as good of performance if you're trying to edit a video on this or do development compared to a regular MacBook Air. But I think HP and AMD have overall created a fantastic product. Anyways, that wraps up my review of the HP Dragonfly Pro. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Links to purchase this will be in the description. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.